It's Wednesday, the 9th of October 2024. Welcome to the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, 5 big stories to race through in 5 minutes, so we better get cracking with story number 1. Finally, the consumer mood is starting to pick up, with sentiment now at its highest level since the Reserve Bank started lifting rates in May 2022.
The Westpac Melbourne Institute Consumer Sentiment Index rose 6% over the past month to almost 89 points, and while any reading below 100 is still negative, it is much better than any time recently. Slowing inflation, prospects of no more rate hikes, coupled with plenty of government spending and a resilient labour market have all helped push consumer confidence higher. The Stage 3 tax cuts probably helped out as well. Consumers are more positive about the future, but family finances versus a year ago still deeply negative. The other data point economists like to look at is the question, is now a good time to buy a household item reading? That's still really weak. Good time to buy a dwelling? That's getting better, though it's still negative. Consumers have been a miserable bunch for the past couple of years, Michael. While we can't say they're happy, they're a bit less grumpy at the moment.
That does sound like progress, Sean, and business confidence is also improving.
Yeah, so both business conditions and confidence have ticked up according to the National Australia Bank business surveys. However, the trend line is still down. Business conditions in particular, and to a lesser extent confidence, have been in positive territory for most of the past decade, excepting the COVID period. That seems to be changing, with leading indicators such as forward orders softening. The price measures are always worth looking at. They show that while input price growth for companies remain a bit elevated, output price growth is back to more normal levels. That suggests inflation is still slowing. That's a good thing.
Indeed. All right, on to story number 2 now. And Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says 1,215 Australians, permanent residents and their immediate family members have been assisted by the government to leave Lebanon.
There were 2 flights out of the area on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, 2 on Monday. 2 were expected to go overnight. 3,892 Australians and their immediate family members are registered to depart still. The PM has condemned Hamas's terror attacks on Israel and called for an immediate ceasefire and the release of the remaining hostages. In a motion in the House of Representatives, the motion condemned the murder and violence of the attacks on October 7 last year, when 1,200 innocent Israelis lost their lives. Mr Albanese said Parliament stood against all forms of anti-Semitism. The coalition didn't support the motion. Opposition leader Peter Dunn said that Mr Albanese was seeking to walk both sides of the street in the divisive debate surrounding tensions in the Middle East.
Story number 3, nearly 4 million smartphones were sold in the first half of 2024. That's up 8% from a year ago.
Of those sales, Android phones accounted for 56%, while Apple took out the remaining 44%, according to smartphone analyst Telsite. Telsite expects total smartphone sales to reach 8.7 million units for the full year, which would be up 7% on last year. And Michael, there are 26 million Australians, so that's just 1 in 3 Aussies, man, woman and child, gets a new phone every year. Having said that, Telsite said that customers are beginning to hang on to their smartphones for longer, particularly in the sub $1,000 market, where the average life cycle is about 4 years. Premium smartphone users replace their devices every 3 years. I think that all means that people are now increasingly holding more than one smartphone device. Telsite said the spike in Android sales could be attributed to the rise of devices with artificial intelligence features already embedded, particularly at lower price points.
Story number 4, hurricane warnings have been issued for portions of west central Florida as Milton, a top-tier Category 5 hurricane over the Gulf of Mexico, continues to rapidly gain strength.
The storm is expected to make landfall late on Wednesday US time. That's tomorrow our time. It's an extremely life-threatening major hurricane, according to the National Hurricane Centre. The centre said it could produce a potentially devastating ocean surge of over 3 metres in some areas, according to a report in the Washington Post. Milton has the potential to be one of the most destructive hurricanes on record for west central Florida. The centre said the storm went from Category 1 to Category 5 in just 24 hours, peak winds of more than 150 kilometres an hour. Milton's the strongest Gulf of Mexico hurricane on record for this late in the year and is among the 3 strongest at any time.
Last one, Sean. Story number 5. Apple has backtracked on plans to release major films in theatres and rather is pushing production back towards its streaming service.
It comes after the disappointing box office performance of several big-budget films, including Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, Argyle, and Fly Me to the Moon. Apple cancelled plans to release Wolves, an action comedy with George Clooney, Brad Pitt in thousands of theatres globally. Instead, the picture made its debut in a limited number of venues before it became available on Apple's streaming service. According to Bloomberg, Apple plans to use a similar approach with the next few titles on its calendar, including the World War II drama Blitz. After spending upwards of $100 million and in some cases more than $200 million on some of the films I mentioned, Apple will now focus on making about a dozen movies a year, most of them produced for less than $100 million.
All right, there we go. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Wednesday, the 9th of October, 2024. Remember to hit follow on the podcast. And if 5 minutes isn't enough, you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed, wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget that every Wednesday we release a new episode of our sister podcast, How Do They Afford That? This week's episode is a great one. It is all about affordable technology, this idea that you do not need to spend a fortune to get some pretty premium tech. You can find that wherever you listen to podcasts, and I'll put a link in today's show notes as well. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.